So, funny story before we get started. Actually, let me just roll the intro that I knocked out like 2 weeks ago, and then we can have a little chat. Enjoy. Well, hey there, YouTube. Good morning. Each of those bags is probably like 1,000 pounds. I'm pretty sure that's what it said. Like, each. Yeah. Who's the noodle arms now? So, not sure if you heard, but as soon as I started chatting at the end of this intro, my phone started blowing up with text notifications. Funny thing is, I always have my phone on silence, and the one time that I don't, I get blasted with a million text messages all at the wrong time. Now, any sensible human being would probably just move forward, move on with their life, and ignore the annoyance of this shot not being perfect. But no, not Ron Brené. Instead, I thought to myself, well, since I gotta stack all this crap back up anyway, I might as well take things to the next level, and instead of having these bags of mineral wool 3 high, let's do 4 high for a more dramatic effect. I mean, why not? What's the worst thing that can happen, right? Well, it just so happens that the worst thing that can happen is exactly what happened. Getting started with the shot a second time, I made it maybe 2 rows in when something happened that I hadn't thought about because I am what you might call an idiot. With the bags being just high enough to be flimsy, the top row started to lean forward, and just with the wrong tug, in a matter of seconds, like a giant stack of dominoes, these massive bags of mineral wool begin moving forward, or in other words, straight towards my Canon C200 equipped with my tried and true 24 1.4 L lens. Knowing good and well that I am not Flash Gordon, all I could do is watch in horror as the momentum turned violent and sent my camera flying in ways that Canon never intended their cameras to be used. So, the camera smacks, hits the ground. I could hear it hit hard enough to know that there was no way in heck this isn't going to leave a mark, and when walking up to the scene of the crime, I can see that my lens is completely thrashed and my camera's viewfinder is completely broken off. So yeah, that's that. It's been a rather frustrating couple of weeks trying to bandage this camera back together again and buying a new lens and learning from a rather expensive mistake. If anything, I hope I can at least get a laugh from you guys about it, of how dumb I was now that it is behind us. All right, enough with that. Let's chat about what you guys want to talk about, acoustics, namely room acoustics, and where I am headed with the sound shed. As you can see, we are making some progress. The walls are up, everything is framed out, and we even have a jump start on some electrical. It has been such a fun and challenging experience to tackle all of this, and who knows? Maybe if this YouTube thing doesn't pan out, I'll pivot and start my own audiophile studio building business. To catch you up to speed, the outer shell of the sound shed is metal. That's right, it's a metal structure, using massive steel beams as the support. And after that, we have a 2-inch thick layer of closed cell foam. And no, that has nothing to do with acoustics. That was chosen for its thermal purposes only. The floor of the studio down here is a giant slab of concrete that's been grinded out by my buddy and will probably be left alone, and I'll simply throw down some massive rug pads and maybe a shag carpet to minimize some of the reflections that we're going to be dealing with. Down the road, if I am not happy with those results, I can always tackle some kind of a floating floor, or maybe consider something like cork or some kind of a wood floor as a potential option. The outer wall is very thick and it has this sturdy tongue and groove OSB that's normally used for subfloors, and the framing is all done with typical 2x4 studs. The insulation being used inside the cavities is Safe & Sound's mineral wool, and I spread things out 24 inches on center. And that, my friends, leads us to this. What we have now is what I believe is the first and super important decisions that one can make when it comes to room acoustics and how this room will eventually sound. Now, keep this in mind that a good sounding room is quite subjective, and some might think that a lively, vibrant, and bright sounding room sounds great, and that's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. But others might think that a warmer, less lively, or even dead sounding room is what they're after, and they think that sounds great. I, for one, hope to strike somewhere in the middle and find some kind of a balance of tackling bass issues with absorption while leaving a lot of the upper mid-range and top end alone to shine. So, how am I going to get there, and what are my next steps? Well, I think a good place to start is considering or pondering what happens when sound hits a wall and what happens when sound hits the inside of the walls in the studio, and what are the consequences of when that happens. Depending on the frequency, as we go up into top end or treble response, the sound will just simply hit the wall and bounce around. In the event where the wall is soft or absorptive, it will of course change the amount of energy that is reflected from the wall. And if this wall or these walls were nothing but absorption, I'd imagine that we would end up killing the top end of the music in a quick hurry. We don't want that. Well, you might, but I don't necessarily want that, and it doesn't align with my vision of a balanced sounding room. Now, as we dive lower in frequencies, moving into lower mid-range, mid-bass, and bass, hear me. This is a very different animal. These frequencies, much like they do inside of a speaker cabinet, will create air pressure, they will flex, and they will even cause resonances. When it comes to lower bass, it's all about sound pressure, pushing and trying to escape, and depending on how low we are talking about, we'll look at this wall that we're talking about right now, laugh at it, and just pass right through it. For the same reason that you always hear bass coming out of clubs or music venues as you walk by, it's the same bass that we are dealing with in our listening rooms, and in this case, my future listening room and YouTube studio. Early on in my planning for the studio, I considered using what's called resilient strips. These strips would have decoupled the inside wall from the studs, and this would have minimized the energy transmission from the sound pressure hitting the wall, traveling through it, and on its way, leaving a wake of resonance for me to try and ignore as I'm critically listening to music. That's not a good thing. As soon as I ditched this idea entirely, my mind started to race for a creative option that first and foremost aims at a similar concept, but second, Something that wouldn't cost me much money at all. Or better yet, doesn't cost me anything. Staring at these walls for days and days while working, something just came to me out of the blue, and at first I thought, that's really dumb. Ron, that's what you would call a dumb idea. But then I came around to thinking about it more, and I thought, maybe this might actually work. And maybe, just maybe, it might actually be brilliant. In our last house, we had a massive shag rug. And if you remember, under that rug, I had 2 giant rug pads that were no longer being used. Giant rug pads. Thick, soft, and can be compressed. At the same time, breathable, where air could travel through it. Are you trekking with me yet? While not decoupling at all like a resilient channel would, by cutting these rug pads into long strips and then sandwiching them in between the inside wall and the stud, what I've done now, folks, is I've created a damper that indeed would minimize the energy transmission from the wall to the stud. Even more, if I was to leave air gaps or cuts in the rug pad strips from cavity to cavity, I've also minimized the chance of panel resonance in each and every single one of these cavities. At this point, the entire shed becomes one cavity, similar to the same effect that we would have had if we gone with a decoupler like resilient channels. Now, this approach might seem a little bit cowboy, and it is. And I needed to check with City Hall if this was even gonna fly for inspection, but when they gave me the green light, I moved on to outside opinions from audiophiles that I actually trust. To my surprise, no red flags, none, 0. The only concern was, that's gonna make hanging your drywall a little bit more of a headache, but yeah, that might work. So yeah, I think I just came up with my very own creative and outside of the box way of how to tackle this inside wall, and heck, it might just actually lead to some positive results. We're gonna find out. Will it be just as good had I went with resilient channels in the first place? No way. I doubt it. I seriously doubt it, but you know what it will be? Free. That's right. It's an acoustic hack that was free and it cost me nothing. So that's the update for today's video. In future videos, I'm gonna need some help. The ceiling is kind of tricky because I have a lot of space above my eye joists, and with space, I want a place for bass to go, and I want to trap it, even though it's the dumbest thing. I wish we didn't say bass trapping. You don't trap bass, but I'm gonna be treating the ceiling as if it is a giant bass trap. And so doing that without losing my vision of a balanced sounding room, keeping the room at least lively enough to give you that sparkle and that shine on top, but yet trapping a bunch of bass up there, that's the goal. That'll be in the next video. And yeah, with that, make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one.